Last week, the Department of Labor announced that the unemployment rate had fallen to 3.7%, a 49-year low. This comes as more good news for the U.S. economy that has been booming in recent years. Here to break it down are Talking Points analysts Michael Furnari and Brandon Ross. Thanks for being here. So, first question. What is the state of the U.S. economy, and how much of this can we attribute to Trump's economic policies?
Well, the economy is definitely booming right now. There's no question about it. We have a few stats here for you. Let's take a look at a little bit of a graph we have. It represents a real spike in unemployment in a real drop in unemployment in recent years. As you mentioned, 3.7%, that's the lowest it's been since 1969. So a very nice job here by President Trump shepherding a good economy. It's debated whether or not this has to do with his economic policies, but again, there are other stats that are showing really positive growth. The GDP has hit 4% or more in some recent quarters and is still hovering a little bit under 4% overall on 2018 so far.
That's a very good point, Brandon. You mentioned the growth, and the noteworthy stat this year was when the growth reached 4% in Q2 this year, something that at least during the Obama administration had not gotten done was the growth had not reached 3% in over a decade. And I think what we're seeing right now is that we're kind of in a transitional period. So since the 2008 crash, obviously it was so devastating to the economy. There was the debt crisis in 2011. I think what we're seeing right now is we're starting to head back into a boom period and we're starting to grow again. And we saw that paralleled with the Federal Reserve, where they kept interest rates very, very low for years and years. And what we're starting to see now is that the Federal Reserve is probably going to start raising the interest rates again. So what that tells you is that we're kind of transitioning away from the financial crisis, and we're heading more into a boom that will hopefully be sustainable going forward.
Not to mention that on that 4% note, a lot of economic experts have been slamming Trump for during the campaign, saying that there was no way we could reach 4% in any single quarter, yet recent stats have shown that just isn't true.
That's a good point. And one other final point that I think is maybe the most tangible way you can connect the economy to Trump, I think the tax cuts are a good point. And I think when you look at the way that corporate gains have really skyrocketed in the last year, I think we're seeing that that's a really obvious connection. Another one that people aren't talking about enough is that Trump, in his rhetoric and in his policies with the regulatory cuts, has been very unabashedly pro-business. And I think that especially with the stock market, and this is maybe the easiest correlation, is that investor confidence is very high right now and consumer confidence is very high. And I think the connection there is pretty easy to make.
And now, so that's, that's the national trends. But here, looking at central New York, is that on par with these national trends we're seeing, or is there anything different going on?
Central New York currently is lagging a little bit behind the rest of the country. Now, over the last 20 years, and this is not just because of the financial crisis, over the last 20 years, Central New York has had a bit of a rough time because it's so prolific with regards to manufacturing and because that's such an important part of the economy. The trends of the last 20 years in macroeconomics have been really rough for Central New York. And I think that now we're seeing growth numbers rise, we're seeing unemployment fall, but it's not to the same degree. And I think that's largely because of why.
Another point is, don't forget, there are a lot of merchant wholesalers in upstate New York and in central New York as well. And that could really take a bit of a hit if these tariffs really go into effect. And that could have some problems with the industry upstate.
So we always hear the president gets blamed for oil prices, war, and the economy. So how is the economy going to help or hurt moving forward come midterm season?
Well, I think voters are really high on the economy right now. A recent poll showed 3 in 4 Americans approve of the economy, and one of the 2 biggest issues that voters believe will sway their vote this year is the economy. This is going to be a very important part of the vote, and it'll probably be a good gauge as to where independents lean on Election Day.
Brandon mentioned, the 3 big issues right now for voters poll-wise are healthcare, the economy, and immigration in that order. Now, I'm a little more skeptical, at least for this election cycle. Now, typically in midterms, the more partisan voters and the more intense and angry voters typically come out. And I think that often kind of reduces midterms to more of kind of the cultural war issues and the partisan issues. So I think that's something that maybe doesn't bode as well for the Republicans. These races are more about turnout and less about appealing to independents the way a general election is in like a presidential year. So I think that that's something that doesn't necessarily bode well for Trump, because I think that we're seeing a lot of anger right now, and maybe the economy is in the back of a lot of those partisan voters' mind.
All right. Thank you, guys. That was a great segment.
Yeah, thank you.